Welcome in everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr., and today we're going to be taking a look at the top 4 decks from our most recent Standard Pauper Youth Tournament held over at Westside Comics on May 6th. The date of this video going up is just a few days before our upcoming Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament, but it is going to be the same format. Dominaria is going to be legal. This is our first Youth Tournament results with Dominaria legal, meaning the Scholarship Tournament is going to be our second tournament with Dominaria legal, so check out what the top players decided to include in their decks from Dominaria. It is going to be $5 to enter our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament, but we will be giving away $750 in scholarship prizes. It's going to be held at Dirtle Zone in IAEA. Doors will open at noon. Tournament will start at 1, so we hope to see you there, and we hope that looking at these top 4 decks is going to help you in deciding what to play at our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament. Even if you don't decide to play any of these 4 decks, you can probably be sure that you will likely play against these 4 decks. Alright, so our top 4 players here, Kyle ended up taking down the tournament with his mono-white aggro deck. This is the second tournament that he's won. Second place over here was Christian, playing mono-red aggro, and then in third place we have Troy. Kyle and Troy are twins, so Troy was playing mono-black aggro, and then Tegan came in fourth place playing blue-green aggro. So 4 aggro decks in the top 4, very indicative of this format. It is the majority of this format is aggro decks. There are some mid-range decks, and I think control decks do exist, but they really struggle with the aggro decks, which are very much everywhere. So we're going to be taking a look at all 4 of these decks today. We will have links to these text versions of the deck in the description of this video, so you can check those out. But we are going to be swapping over here to Magic Online. So this is Kyle's first place mono-white aggro deck. It is 62 cards, so I do think that he can maybe trim a couple cards to try to maximize the deck. This is a little different from my version of mono-white aggro. I've been playing the equipment in the main deck, Hone Khopesh, which is functionally the same as Short Sword here. I've been playing Hone Khopesh in the main deck, as well as 4 compulsory rests in the main deck. Kyle decided to cut those, move them to the sideboard, and instead play a higher curve. So he's playing more 3-drops, more 4-drops with Call of the Cavalry. These are very, very solid choices for 3-drops and 4-drops. I am playing Unwavering Initiate and Talkrop Elite in my mono-white aggro deck, but I do think that Call of the Cavalry and Territorial Hammerskull are the next best options at that spot in the curve for this archetype. Territorial Hammerskull, very good at pressuring the opponent's blockers, especially when combined with Fanbearer, and Call of the Cavalry just lets you, it puts 4 power onto the battlefield, and it's spread out, so it helps you make trades against the other aggro decks as well. You know, it can't just be answered by one removal spell, right? Because you split the power and toughness. So not much to be said about this archetype. I think if you do want to play this archetype, the necessary cards are Sacred Cat, Fanbearer, Cartouche of Solidarity, Gustwalker, Oketra's Avenger. I think Unwavering Initiate is a must-play. Talkrop Elite is the best 4-drop in my opinion. And then the other spots are flexible. I really like playing Short Sword and or Hone Khopesh in the deck. The removal spells can be moved to the sideboard. You don't necessarily have to main deck them, as Kyle displayed here with his first place finish. But having them in the sideboard is definitely nice. So, you know, this deck, I've been using it in the end boss matches. Whenever Standard Pauper F&M rolls around, I've been playing my version of mono-white aggro. I think that this archetype is just very consistent. You get to play some of the best cards, and Kyle showed us that it is very capable of winning a tournament. So, expect to play against this deck in our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament this Saturday. Alright, moving on. Our second place deck here is mono-red aggro. So, a new addition to this archetype here from Dominaria, Keldon Raider. I'm not sure if this card is better than Emberhorn Minotaur, but it is solid. 4 mana, 4/3, right? That's the same stats as Emberhorn Minotaur. Emberhorn Minotaur can be exerted to give it +1/+1 and Menace. This card does not have that ability, but it does give you the option to discard a card when it comes into play and then draw a new card. I did see Christian play this card a few times, and he opted not to use the ability, but when he did use the the ability, cashing in a low impact card or a land to dig deeper into your deck is what this deck wants to be doing. So Christian built this deck. He said his cousins, the twins, Troy and Kyle, helped him build this deck. And the way that they've been building their aggro decks, I think, is spot on. They want to be playing a very, very low curve, mostly 1 and 2 drops, right? They're maximizing here on combat tricks, cheap spells that interact with the opponent, maximizing on shocks, maximizing on lightning strikes. They're playing 3 built to smash here to make sure that you're winning in combat, to trade up with creatures. I'm not a huge fan of Cartouche of Zeal, but it does help with the game plan of just like keeping the pressure on. Bloodlust Inciter is a decent 1-drop to kind of help you curve out. Fanatical Firebrand is great. It can kill something, it can attack. Renegade Tactics, again, not my favorite card, in line with Cartouche of Zeal, but it does help you keep pushing through damage. They're playing Fathom Fleet Firebrand, Firebrand Archer, Nest Robber, Aether Chaser, right? Just all the solid red 2-drops. Thresher Lizard, I think, is great in a deck like this because your curve is so low, it's very likely that you're going to be emptying out your hand. So, this is one way to build mono red aggro. I would call this mono red hyper aggro because it's just all 1 and 2 drops almost. The mono red decks that I've been building have had much less 1 drops and a slightly higher curve. The Fling deck that we featured here on our channel last week had many more 3 and 4 drops. But this is one way to build it, and Christian proved that it is a successful way to build it, taking second place in the tournament, his only loss in the Swiss was to Kyle's mono white deck, and then his loss in the finals was to Kyle's mono white deck. Red does have a Blazing Volley and Dual Shot, which might be the best sideboard cards right now in the format because there are so many 1 toughness creatures. Especially in this deck and the mono black deck that we're going to be taking a look at in a minute. Unfortunately, the mono white deck does not have very many 1 toughness creatures. They are playing Oketra's Avenger, which has 1 toughness, and then Sacred Cat, which has 1 toughness, but the rest of their creatures have more than 1 toughness, so you don't want too many of this effect, but this effect is very, very good against the other hyper aggro decks. One of the big reasons to be playing red. The biggest reason to be playing red, I think, is Shock and Lightning Strike. Alright, so that is mono red aggro. Moving on here, mono black aggro Troy took this to 3rd place, losing to Christian in the top 4. We've featured this deck recently on the channel. I built a version of this deck. I was playing Sparring Construct. Troy decided to continue playing Blightkeeper. It's very possible that the flying is more important than the utility of Sparring Construct when it dies, just wanting to get damage in. This deck's big weakness is to Dual Shot. Right, they're playing 8 1-drops that die to Dual Shot. Stronghold Confessor, if you play it on 1, dies to Dual Shot. So does Aether Poisoner and the Servo Token. So this deck is a little weak to Dual Shot, but it does have tons and tons of cards. This version, they decided not to play Skullduggery in the main deck, instead opting to just play the 4 Supernatural Stamina and then more 1-drop creatures. They're playing 12 1-drop creatures here, and then 7 2-drop creatures. They're maximizing on Die Young. I like Vicious Offering in this slot because, sacking a Servo or, a 1 mana creature to take out their big giant creature is potentially useful. I did see Troy use some energy from Aether Poisoners to take down a 3/3 with Die Young, so Die Young is a solid option. I think Vicious Offering being an instant, letting you sack a creature, especially if it's underneath a Compulsory Rest or underneath an Unquenchable Thirst or something like that, or it's, you're chump blocking with it or whatever. I think that Vicious Offering gives you more flexibility, but Die Young is a very solid option here as well. He's also playing not just 4 Die Young, but also 2 Moment of Craving, so he's playing lots of removal spells to just help his 1-drops get in there. Rush of Vitality is a sweet 5th combat trick to allow his creatures to trade up, maybe swing a race with the lifelink. And then, of course, the Sky Skiff Night Market Lookout combo Night Market Lookout, whenever it becomes tapped, an opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That's great when you're attacking, and it's even more great when you're crewing a Sky Skiff, because you're tapping it to crew the Sky Skiff, triggering it, and then getting to attack. So this deck is very solid. It is weak to the red aggro deck, which we saw when Troy lost to Christian in the top 4. I think Dual Shot had a lot to do with that. Getting to play Shock and Lightning Strike, which are just very clean answers to all of these cards, I think gives the red aggro deck a slight edge. Not much to say here about the sideboard. Defiant Salvager, I don't know if I like this creature very much in the sideboard. I think that the Thallid, this guy, Deathbloom Thallid, 3 mana, 3/2. When it dies, you make a 1/1 Sapperling token. I think this is a much better 3-drop than Salvager. Salvager, only being able to use the ability as a sorcery means that you're just opening yourself up to tons of removal. And I really don't like this card. I do like Cobbled Wings. I saw him put Demonic Vigor to use a few times. I do wish that they found room for Hone Kopesh in this deck, or Short Sword. But overall, this strategy can be built a number of different ways, and this is one of the ways to build it. Troy did a great job playing this deck to 3rd place. He is playing 61 cards in the main deck. I would highly recommend trimming down to 60, keeping the lands at about 20. The deck could even play a couple of Desert of the Glorified, but having so many 1-drops, I think it might be too much of a liability. All right, moving on to our 4th place deck, played by Tegan. She did play this deck to 2nd place in a recent tournament, so if it looks familiar, that is why. She named the deck Swalla after her favorite card, Frilled Sandwalla. Great 1-drop creature. You can attack with it, activate the ability as an instant. So once they decide if they want to block or not, that's when you get to decide if you want to use this ability when you're attacking. Slitherblade, Aerial Guide went to very much use. She lost to Kyle in the top 4. He was playing mono white aggro, but she did almost race him both games. It was very, very close. So this deck is just really good at racing. It plays very solid creatures: Slitherblade, Sandwalla, Ronus' Stalwart, Spellweaver Eternal, Harrier Naga. I think Hooded Brawler has slightly higher power, but she did make a good point that Hooded Brawler dies to Shock, whereas Harrier Naga does not. So that's a great reason. You don't want your 3-drops to die to Shock. So Harrier Naga is a fine choice. She is playing 1 Hooded Brawler, yes. And then Aerial Guide just helps you push damage through. Only playing 3 Hone Kopesh, 2 Renegade Freighters, and then a ton of combat tricks. She's playing 3 Shed Weakness and 4 Gift of Strength. Keep in mind when playing with these spells, especially younger, newer players kind of are tempted to use these spells to just like cast it and deal 3 more damage to your opponent when they don't block your creature. You don't usually want to do that unless you're going to kill your opponent either that turn or for sure you're going to kill them the following turn. Usually spending your mana to play a creature is better than just spending your mana to deal damage straight to their face. And usually you want to save these cards to help your creatures win in combat, because then you're going to trade your pump spell for one of your opponent's cards, and you're going to get ahead on cards and likely on tempo as well, because your 1 or 2 mana spell will trade with their creature, which might cost more. So you don't want to be casting these spells to just deal damage to your opponent's face unless you're going to be killing them, or sometimes if you're going to do it the turn before you're going to be attacking for lethal. Sometimes that does come up, but general rule of thumb when you're playing with pump spells is you don't want to cast them just to deal damage to your opponent. Alright, she's got the 1 negate to keep her opponents honest. Cartouche, almost every deck plays non-creature spells, so this is a fine inclusion. Cartouche of Knowledge helps give her creatures flying so that she can race, which is what this deck is all about. Just a very good deck. Her curve is slightly higher than the hyper aggro decks, the hyper aggro red, hyper aggro black. Her curve is slightly lower than Kyle's curve. Kyle had 8 4-drops and 8 3-drops in his mono white deck, and he ended up taking the the match against Tegan in the top 4. So something to keep in mind. I think that this deck is very powerful. I think it's playing very powerful cards. Frilled Sandwalla. Tegan has really only been the only student playing this card in our youth tournaments, but I think that Frilled Sandwalla is a high enough power level that it should be seeing more play than it is. Unfortunately, a mono green aggro deck is a little bit lacking on tools right now, but I think that pairing green with another color for an aggro deck is a fine choice, which Tegan showed us here. So these are our top 4 decks. As I said, even if you don't choose to pick up one of these decks, you are very likely to play against one of these decks in our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament. And if you're kind of waffling on what deck to play on Saturday, I would highly recommend just picking up a tried and true deck and playing it. I know that brewing decks is very, very appealing. It's an undeniable appeal to the game. I love brewing decks, but I will not play a deck that I brewed up in a competitive tournament that I'm trying to win unless I've done a ton of testing and I know that it's gonna stand the test, right? When it comes to playing competitively, playing decks that have already been proven, that's usually the starting point. And then you can tweak with proven decks if you want to, but trying to brew something up, especially if you're waffling on what deck to play this late in the game, with 2 days to go before the tournament, I would highly recommend just picking up a tried and true deck. There's nothing wrong with net decking or borrowing decks from somebody. Humankind has progressed to the point it is because we've excelled at sharing information, and that's no different in Magic. Sharing information is not a bad thing. So if you want to pick up one of these decks, they're tried and true, they're tested. I would highly recommend it. I recommended a couple changes for them, but that is the top 4 from our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament. What am I looking for? All right. And if you want to support what we do, you can, of course, hit that like button. That always helps. Hit that subscribe button to keep getting Standard Pauper content. And you can also become a Patreon subscriber to monetarily donate to our project. All proceeds go to helping grow youth magic here on Oahu, creating great content here for the Standard Pauper format. We're doing some Brawl content as well. We are hoping to run more than one scholarship tournament for this coming school year, and we would not be able to do any of that without the help from our generous patron subscribers. So please consider becoming a subscriber. All of our subscribers get access to our monthly expenditure report, as well as some other perks, so you know exactly what we are doing. And we very much value the feedback of anyone who sees the value in our project to donate. So if you want to let us know what you think, we love to hear some feedback. Again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for stopping by, and hope to see you at our Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament. Peace!